Who wants to look at some episode 4 stills from the Wheel of Time? Well, I know I do, so that is what we're going to be doing in this video. But of course, if you're someone that does not want to have anything spoiled, I would suggest you highly click off this, because I'm going to be discussing the stills that we've gotten for episode 4, and of course everything that relates to the stills, so that could be spoilers from the first 3 episodes and book spoilers, so there's that to be cautious over as well. Without further ado though, let's jump right in. So straight away, wow, now this is a photo. We've got a look at both Logain and Moiraine meeting one another for the first time. This is something we knew was going to happen from the kind of teaser we got a little bit earlier today from, I believe it was Alvaro Morte, if not the Wheel of Time on Twitter, where we saw a excerpt from Moiraine where she says, "I want to meet this false dragon." And this photo obviously is of that meeting, and this is absolutely crazy to see. And I'm really thankful they've made changes to the book series going into the shows. I think this is a real cool moment to have that is brand new for all of us when we will start watching episode 4. It's going to be really intriguing to see kind of what they both are going to be speaking about in this scene. Whether there's kind of a kind of battle of wills, battle of minds between the two, because as you can see quite clearly, and as we know from Moiraine, she always thinks she's more important and higher up than most people. You could see that case in point very much with Nyneave in the first episode, and as you can see from Logain's kind of stance and positioning, he feels he's on as equal a level, if not above her, because he obviously believes he's the prophesied dragon reborn. So it's going to be so intriguing to see how this scene plays out, what the showrunners and writers room have come up with in terms of dialogue, and how this is going to play out later on in the season. Because we do know, of course, that Logain does make it all the way to the White Tower, where he will most likely be gentled at some point in this first season, if not second. So that's really cool to see. Up next, we have another photo of Logain. Now this is quite obviously taken in the cave where they're in, and now these couple of axes here, I believe, are from Maxim, one of the warders of Alanna. I would say they're both from Maxim, because he used the one that uses axes. Ivan is the one with the bow and arrow that I've seen. I could be completely wrong on that, but I'm certain that I am. I'm not. It's just really cool. What I love about this photo is the fact that Logain has not batted an eyelid at these two axes that are literally fingertips or a half a swing away from his neck. He has no care that they're there. He's very calm in the moment. So this could be potentially a scene where he has control of the one power again, or he's just completely not fazed by what's happening to him. Because if you think and try to put yourself in his shoes and think from his point of view, if you believe you're the prophesied dragon reborn, you kind of would feel you're a bit more invincible than the average Joe or the average male channeler who just happens to stumble on the fact that they can channel, and so he feels he won't be killed in these moments or instances. So that could be what's at play here. And I just get the vibe Logain as a character in the show is going to be someone that's not worried or not scared about confrontation and battles, as we've already seen. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And also, I just want to note the attention to detail on the axes themselves, I think, are really cool. I think they're definitely like a pair of axes, like one accompanies the other or one is part of the other. So that's really cool to see. Up next, we have a photo of Maxim and Alanna. Now this is of course no doubt from the battle that they have, or the skirmish they have with the dragon sworn that have come to try and free Logain from the capture of the Aes Sedai, which is really cool. There's not an awful lot to be said of this photo, but I will obviously mention Alana's outfit. I think looks really cool, and it almost, it's really cool. And I think Priyanka Bose looks fantastic as an Aes Sedai. I think they've kind of nailed and hit the mark with every single Aes Sedai that I've seen, but in particular like the main Aes Sedais. So like Alana, Liandrin, Moiraine, Leanne, Siobhan. I can keep going on, but you see what I'm getting at here. There's like an extra layer or level to them over, like, say, the extra Aes Sedai or the extras, which are Aes Sedai. Up next, we've got another photo of Maxine, very much once again, I believe, holding that kind of axe that we saw in the previous photo that I was going on about. Again, this is outside the cave, so I would say he's most certainly looking in the direction of the Dragon Sworn that will be coming here to have a battle with them all. He looks like he's ready for a battle. He's very serious, very stern. And I think, he's obviously getting himself mentally prepared for the battle to come. Once again, very much again the same thing now with Ivan. Now it's a slightly different moment in the episode, because he's obviously drawn an arrow and he's knocked it into his bow and aiming it in the direction, no doubt, of a Dragon Swarm. And so I think this is at the moment just leading up to the battles commencing, or perhaps in the midst of it. Again, it's really nice, I think, to see that they haven't kind of put every single warder in one category of being a swordsman or a blade master. There's a very nice kind of mixture of weapons that they all use. Some have a preference for the sword, some have a preference for the axe, some for the bow and arrow, and I'm sure some will have a preference for the spear. So I think that's a nice, neat little addition to the kind of warders and what they're about. I think it's something that will be interesting for the show. And maybe there will be something like with a blade master, maybe there will be a axe master. Maybe that's a far out reach that I'm getting at there, but that's something to be intrigued about. Oh, now this is an interesting photo. I like this. So this is obviously during the night after the end of episode 3, where we see Nyneave, Lan, Moiraine start to enter the Aes Sedai camp where they have Logain captured. This is obviously in the middle of the night when they've kind of settled down for the evening and they're just conversing. As you can see, Nyneave has a drink here. And I'm sure they're just chatting about the events in the world, the events leading up to their meetings. And I'm sure Nyneave is being a bit guarded in what she tells people, because obviously she doesn't know them from Joe or Adam. They're just like Joe blogs on the street. And nobody goes and tells them their life history now, do they, if you were to meet just a random person. So this is another scene I think is going to be really interesting to see how it plays out, what the talk, what the dialogue, the writing for these scenes are going to be. I think there will be moments of, like, for example, Nyneave asking Stepin, Ivan, and perhaps all the other sisters what a false dragon is, and just learning all these sorts of things, and in turn teaching all the newcomers to the show what all these terminologies mean, which I think is a nice and smart way to go about that, because not only is Nyneave very fresh to the world of Aes Sedai and all of that, and the natural things that come around with the wider world story in terms of like false dragons, the dragon reborn, and all the prophecies and whatnot. It's very much the same for casual readers or new comers to the show, and so that's a nice way to introduce elements to Nyneave and at the same time to the audience. So up next we got a photo of Lan. Now this is gonna send people that stan Lan and Nyneave through the roof, because he's very much guarding her here. As you can see, he kind of has no care for the rest of them here. This is another warder. Who this warder is, I am not sure. We've got another Green Adger sister here, and a few other warders in the background as well. Now, as we've seen in a lot of the trailers, we've seen a huge amount of bow and arrows coming towards this very group, and I think this is what they're all kind of looking up at. And I think we're in the moment where Alanna will channel and then stop all the arrows in the middle of the air, or in mid-air I should say. And as we can just see, I just love the fact how protective Lan is already of Nyneave. That's really nice to see, and it's going to be interesting to see just how far a progression we're going to get with their relationship, whether it's going to be sped up and fast forwarded a lot earlier to develop it and to have this be brought forward to then obviously have it play out on the show, because there's always certain elements you need for different aspects of your viewers. Some people love relationships, some people love the magic system, some people love lore. And so I think that's a potential, change for the show that they might introduce in the speeding up process. Whether that's, correct in my assumption there is to be seen. But I think it's something you guys should keep an eye out for in case it does happen. Oh, this is cool. So this is kind of showing what I was speaking about a little earlier, and how there's definitely a variance in terms of what warders use as their weapons. And of course, this is another really cool moment to see a bit of a training regiment happening between warders to kind of sharpen their edges in terms of combat, because warders aren't always in combat, although they are always ready for it. And so I think this is kind of just a sparring session that we're going to see, which I think is going to be so cool to watch on the show this Friday. It's going to be interesting to see just how much they're going to invest in these particular scenes. And I also wonder whether this is a practice sword and a practice axe or axes for stepping here. I would suggest it's not, because they're not in the White Tower, and so they're out in the field, and you don't carry anything that will be unnecessary when you're out in the field, out in the moment. So I would say these are very much not practice swords and practice axes. And just, I think just seeing interactions between warders for the first time on the show, and just seeing how they greet each other and how they just interact is going to be a really cool thing to watch. I think we're going to get some really cool scenes in this 4th episode that we all are going to love and enjoy. Right, up next we have a photo of Egwene in the Tinker Camp. Now this is during the night, and I'm sure we could perhaps be seeing that kind of famous Tinker dance. I think it was called the Sa or something along those lines. That could potentially be happening here. So yeah, I'm really hoping and praying they've kept and included that, because I think that's one of those moments that I loved in the first book, reading that and kind of visualizing that in my mind. And I think it'll just be a really cool scene to have included, and I hope they've included it. And yeah, just the whole situation that Egwene and Perrin find themselves in. As we've seen from the teaser a little bit earlier, Perrin is very much suspicious of them at this point in time, because he can't see how a faction or a group of people could be this friendly, this welcoming, this warm to a set of strangers, and also the fact that they don't carry weapons and they won't harm another human being, let alone defend themselves. And so I think all these things are going to play into Perrin's mind, whereas Egwene is on the opposite side and opposite scale in terms of her thinking with these Tuathon. I think she fully embraces their traditions, and say, for example, if she wasn't going to become an Aes Sedai or had the spark in her, I could quite easily see her kind of settling into a way where she would end up in a Tuathon camp. Because I think even reading the first book, The Eye of the World, when we're introduced to the Tinkers, I feel and felt, Egwene felt very much at home and warm and welcome there. And so it'd be interesting to see kind of what we see out of this scene in terms of like the traditions of the Tinkers. I think we'll get an introduction to those sorts of things here. And it'd just be really nice to see that further explored on the screen. Next, we have a photo of Aram, Egwene and Perrin in the middle of a campfire. And as you can see, they've very much been welcomed at this point into the camp. And they've been given kind of these warm, colourful blankets, which I think are really nice, really cool to see. But it's interesting to see Aram's isn't. His is very much a plain shade of grey. Now, I wonder if that is to do with the fact he very much, at least towards the end of his kind of character arc in the books, he leaves the Tinkers and kind of goes along with Perrin and learns to become a swordsman or whatever it was at the time. And he just kind of wasn't completely set in the Tinker's mindset, even from the beginning, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's going to be an interesting aspect to see if they bring that up. But also the dynamic between these three as well, between Aram and Egwene, between Perrin and Aram, to just see whether they're going to keep it, you know, very much on point as it was in the books. I think that's going to be very intriguing to see whether they keep the keep true to the books, or whether they're going to kind of diverge away from that to a degree. And so that's going to be interesting to see how that plans out in this 4th episode. Right, up next, and for the final still, we have a look at Mat, Rand and Tom. Now, there's something really interesting at play, and I can quite clearly make it out from all of their expressions. So for one, they're still in Breen Spring without a doubt, in a different house within the village. But if you look at Mat, he's pointing that dagger towards a certain something, and we all know what that is. It's that fade that we know is on the way from that 3rd episode. And I think quite a few things point to that. Number one, look at both Rand and Tom. Their expressions and what they're looking at is kind of a, oh my god, sort of shocking moment, or oh shit, it's here. And then as for Mat, he very much is, I would suggest, starting to feel the effects and the corruption of that taint on the Shadar the Goth dagger even more. And so I think we're going to see an even more exaggerated version of Mat as a result of that in this 4th episode. And I think there might be a second side effect of that dagger, because from the teaser from earlier today, it seemed very much as though Mat was the first person to notice this fade. And the impression I got was he noticed it because it was lurking in the shadows. As we know, fades can do that, so it's quite hard to spot them. And so I feel, you know, that this kind of secondary effect potential with this dagger could be that because it's kind of dark and has taint from Shadar the Goth, it maybe makes Mat able to see the fade that much easier than, say, the other two men here. That could be a far-reaching viewpoint that I have, but maybe that's something to think of. And of course, if I'm wrong, it could just be the fact Mat was a bit more perceptive of his surroundings and just noticed that fade to begin with before the other two. Now, what's really intriguing to me is to see how this is going to kind of end. Is it going to stay true to the books? Are we going to get kind of the ending we got when they were at Rightbridge, where Mat and Rand are ordered by Tom to run away from the fade while Tom fights and defends the boys from that fade, and we get the ending from that book where Tom screams and we all presume that he's dead? Or whether they're going to kind of change that ending and maybe make a slight deviation for the show, and perhaps Tom will meet up with the boys at a later date in a further episode later in this first season, or perhaps second. So that's going to be interesting, because we do know for a fact Alexander is back in Prague to film season 2 of the show. So we know he's not going to be biting the dust, which I think we all knew wouldn't be the case, because some of his background history and stories that can be explored and brought to life are going to really help play out certain other aspects of different characters and different people within the show. So that's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out. But I think this kind of fight sequence is going to be really cool, because we're finally going to get a look at how a Fade battles, and to see Tom finally in action with those very quick hands that he's got. It's almost like a quick draw from that Final Fantasy series with his daggers. So yeah, that's going to be really cool, and I can't wait to see it. Right guys, well, that is the end of the video. I hope you've all enjoyed it. This is a very late one for me, and I'm gonna head off for the night and just kind of enjoy my evening. I hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, please leave the video a thumbs up, and of course, if you have any comments on anything that I've spoken about, or perhaps you've saw something that I personally missed from these stills, do leave it in the comments down below. Right guys, I'll catch you all a little bit later in the week with another Wheel of Time video.